So after my review of the 2013 Tom Cruise movie Oblivion, which I did yesterday, some of you asked me for a more in-depth analysis and to explore some of the film's themes. And having given it some thought, I realized I actually do have a good bit more to say, enough to produce another video. So you might see this as an addendum to my review of the film. I'm going to assume you've already seen the movie, so it goes without saying, spoilers ahead. Now we're going to skip to the end of the film first. I guess my one primary criticism is the final climactic moment where Jack and Beach destroy the Tet. I think it's a bit too Independence Day-ish, and maybe a little too convenient that Sally/Tet could detect that Jack's respiration and heart rate had increased, and a voice analysis indicated that Jack was lying to Sally. So why didn't the Sally/Tet just destroy Jack right then and there? Well, as my dad always says in these situations, because it wasn't in the script. To be fair, it's probably the only weak moment in the film, but I'm nitpicking here. The ending still works fine, and in fact, this oversight by the Tet intelligence could be explained by the fact that, well, the Tet had made several key errors in fully understanding human psychology, and as we're seeing with artificial intelligence today, it lacks true intelligence and the ability to innovate and create. It can only extrapolate and synthesize based on available data. The Tet wanted to take over the planet Earth and consume its resources, but it needed humanity's help to achieve this. According to Beach, it began by sending ships filled with clones of Jack Harper that were more like robots, biological, sure, but lacking a soul, merciless killers that obeyed the Tet's orders without question. So why then, in Phase 2 of the takeover, did the Tet proceed to produce the maintenance and security Jack Harpers along with all of the Victorias, with clearly their own free will and humanity? I have a theory about this, but keep in mind the Tet clearly makes mistakes and errors in judgment based on a misinterpretation of the information it receives, especially when it comes to human nature. Case in point, when the original Jack and Victoria approached the Tet in the Odyssey, Victoria takes an awkward selfie of the two of them, and Jack is a little taken by surprise by this moment. He turns his head quickly, not realizing what's happening, but the photograph ultimately looks a bit misleading. It's the same photograph we see in their Sky apartment from the beginning of the film. The photo would give anyone the impression that Jack and Victoria were lovers, and that's clearly what the Tet deduced also, which was its first mistake. I think we can also get an insight into one of the reasons why the cloned Victoria was unwilling to listen to Jack Tech 49 when he was trying to tell her the truth about what's really going on. The Tet had recreated the personalities of the original Victoria and Jack, including her romantic interest in him. The Tet had made the mistake of assuming from the photo and Victoria's feelings that they must have been a couple already, and decided to construct a life for them based on this. But it needed to ensure that their memories of most of their life had been erased. But just as the Tet had misinterpreted the situation between Victoria and Jack, it had also failed to account for a critical variable: the human soul. Something of the original Jack remained intact through all of the generations of clones. And this is an element that sort of reminded me of one of the themes of Blade Runner a little bit. The original title of the Philip K. Dick novel of Blade Runner being Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? Many critics and fans maintain that Deckard is a replicant based on an important clue in the final cut version of the movie. He dreams of a unicorn running in the woods. Because the character of Gaff made an origami unicorn, it suggests that he was aware that the unicorn dream is an implanted one, just like all of the other memories of a replicant. In Oblivion, the reverse is true. Jack Tech 49 is dreaming the memories of the original Jack Harper and is haunted by a face of a woman he's never met but believes he knows. So the question is, to what degree is this clone really the original Jack Harper? So there's certainly some interesting philosophical questions to answer there. But as we find out, this is Julia, the wife of the original Jack Harper. But I think this is where we can explain why the Tet decided to produce clones of Jack and Victoria that weren't just soulless automatons like the first wave of Jack clones during the war. The Tet makes use of drones, but they're not very intelligent. They need human maintenance, they need instructions. The Tet probably realized the value of the human spark, the indefinable attributes of human ingenuity, creativity, and improvisation, as well as spontaneity, which makes humans ideal for complex problem-solving needed for the maintenance and security work of managing the drones and water fusion rigs. Which is why the Tet needed to tap into their human potential and capacity in order to achieve its mission, and it possibly learned over the decades that human beings are more productive and effective when they feel a sense of fulfillment, meaning, and purpose. They're also much less likely to rebel against authority if they're provided with comfort and abundance. So the Jack and Victoria maintenance clones that were dotted around the planet, including the 49th ones we spent most of the film with, they were permitted to have their emotions and a semblance of a desirable home life, a relationship, affection for each other, comfort, stability, and a satisfying, purposeful existence, thus allowing their human souls to flourish. This is especially true in the case of Jack, because we know that he dreams of the memories of Julia, his wife. But as I say, the Tet failed to take into account the consequences of permitting these clones to enjoy a full human experience, because doing so allowed Jack to access the transcendent, the spirit of the original Jack Harper, which was first evidenced by the fact that he was inspired by a quote from Thomas Babington Macaulay's character of Horatio in the Lays of Ancient Rome, and how can men die better than facing fearful odds for the ashes of his fathers and the temples of his gods? The Tet cannot understand humanity beyond a superficial and intellectual level. Questions of the intangible, such as the spirit, the human heart and soul and love, these are concepts it cannot comprehend, break down or quantify, which is why it keeps asking Victoria and Jack if they are still an effective team, because it can only consider things within the parameters of productivity and output and quality of labour. It only appreciates their capacity to operate, much like one of its drones. Victoria is perhaps the most important character in the film because she gives us a key insight into a human being's capacity for self-deception. Unlike Jack, she chooses not to know the truth. When he tries to explain to her, she resists him and literally says, "I don't want to know." She gives Julia a frosty reception because her presence represents the collapse of her world. As far as Victoria is concerned, she's going to have her happy ever after in just 2 weeks, and she and Jack will be off to Titan with everyone else and humanity will be saved. All the sacrifices and work that they've been doing will have paid off. But Victoria is like a normie in denial. She blindly obeys authority because she chooses to embrace the comforting lies of the system. I don't think that the Victoria clone was any less human than Jack 49. I think she was just in denial and unable to accept the traumatic and horrifying truth, because to do so would be too disturbing and it would destroy her entire understanding of the world and indeed herself. Within the false reality that Tet had created for her, she was an important person doing important work for the future of humanity, and she was heroic. She had a man she loved. She was soon going to settle down with him and spend the rest of their lives on Titan together. Victoria was happy in her blissful ignorance. But when Jack approached her with the truth, her ignorance became willful, and she dug her heels in out of fear of learning that her life was a lie. To learn the truth would force her to reevaluate everything about the world and herself, and this is often far too frightening for a lot of people. To learn that she is in fact contributing to the destruction of the world, and that she isn't unique. She's one of possibly dozens of copies doing the same job, being promised the same fictitious future, and that she's little more than a useful slave to an evil authoritarian alien force. And that's just way too overwhelming for a person to accept. But to make matters worse, Victoria would have to also learn that Jack doesn't really love her, and her relationship with him is also a lie. And this would completely crush her in every regard. Considering Victoria in this way makes her a much more sympathetic character. At one point in the film, Jack asks her if she remembers anything from before the memory wipe, because he obviously remembers Julia in his dreams. It's very possible that Victoria does remember, and that might have been interesting for the film to explore. In fact, from her reaction in that scene, I think she does.
Our job is not to remember.
Perhaps Victoria dreams of memories of unrequited feelings for Jack, from when the original versions of themselves were astronauts. These would of course be painful memories she does not want to revisit, so this might be obviously the reason she doesn't want to remember the past and chooses to block it out, thus voluntarily embracing the lie of the reality that Tet has provided for them. She may very well have inherited feelings of jealousy towards Julia from the original Victoria, and this is why she is so hostile to Julia, because Julia represents the cold, hard truth and signifies that her constructed life is breaking down. Also, in the scene where Jack brings Julia home and opens the stasis unit that she's been in, he briefly leaves the room for a moment to get medical supplies. Victoria stares at Julia with a look that's so intense it communicates many emotions at once. Brilliant performance from Andrea Riseborough once again. Her expression suggests more than just fear or panic, but a realization that she recognizes Julia, and she understands that Julia is a threat to her relationship with Jack. The original Julia had romantic feelings for Jack, but he didn't return her affections. So Victoria had to endure the agony of unrequited love and seeing Jack and Julia happy together. All of this painful emotion returns to Victoria when she sees Julia lying there in the stasis unit. Moreover, Julia, who of course is not a clone, she's the original one and only Julia, she immediately recognizes Victoria as a danger and doesn't trust her. When Victoria is about to inject her with something for medical purposes, Julia stops her and says, "Don't touch me." Julia remembers who the original Victoria was. She knows what she was like, and she was likely aware of the original Victoria's feelings for her husband. I suppose the only other questions that remain are, how many other Victoria and Jack clones are there left on planet Earth? It wasn't completely clear if Jack 49 and Jack 52 were the last Jack clones left. Victoria 49 was killed by a drone, but Victoria 52 must have survived. Is she the last Victoria remaining? If so, what happened to her? Even though Jack 52 intended to end up with Julia, wouldn't he at least have wanted to go back for Victoria and liberate her out of that sky tower and explain to her, along with the scavengers, that the war is now over? The Tet/Sally has been destroyed, and so have the drones. One hopes someone got her out of there, or she found a way out, because otherwise she would have starved to death in that tower. Anyway, I kind of like when a film sometimes leaves plot points and stuff like this unresolved and up to the audience imagination, and doesn't try to answer every single question. Mysteries such as these are interesting fodder for speculation and fan discussions. That concludes my analysis of Oblivion, a sci-fi film that I think is extremely worthwhile. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye. The Dave Cullen Show is made possible by you, my generous subscribers. If you'd like to support my work, head on over to my Subscribe star, linked below in the description box, and for a pledge of as little as $1 per month, you can help to keep the show going. I'm also doing one-to-one monthly subscriber chats. Thanks again. Take care.